Whoa, that's embarrassing. What's up? Welcome back to the Dynasty Grind. My name's Peter Howdy on threads and Twitter and places. This is the first official week. It's actually the second week, third week. Wait, we did an episode where we were no longer part of on the DLF YouTube channel, but we were in the DLF StreamYard. And then we did a week last week where I literally fell asleep. So technically that was the first one where we were going to be using my own StreamYard again. I had to remember the password. This is the first official episode. We're not on the live on the DLF channels, and also not in their StreamYard. Sucking from the background. It means nothing to you guys because it should look exactly the same, and it'll be exactly the same, except for the fact you can't watch it on the DLF YouTube channel because they hate us now. It's just the honest truth. They just hate it. But yeah, I guess that's exciting, and also I have some rookie ranks and some more understanding of this class. And so it should be fun. We've got Zach. Russ will definitely not show up, but we can pretend he might, and that's fun. And also, because we have to remove DLF, I felt like we should remove DLF branding from the stuff, just if they don't want to be associated. That's fine with me. We best remove it. And so I messaged Bob Gilchrist, who did all our other stuff, and he set us up with some new DLF with new Dynasty Grind backgrounds and drops. So first time I get to play that for you all as we go talk to Zach. It's a little longer. But I think in its own way far superior.
You know what I mean? It's longer. It's catchy. I'm right. I dig it. Peter, it's good to see you.
How you doing, Zach?
You too, I'm doing well. Yeah.
Oh. How far are you into this rookie draft at this point? I've got like 14 wide receiver ranks, and I feel pretty burnt out on wide receivers. I got to be honest with you. I still don't know anything about them, but I'm pretty confident in their profiles. I do like to know the stories. Like I know who played too fewer games, so I want to go read about how their career went, but I don't know any of the narratives. But I do know if they played 8 games or if they played 16, stuff like that. So technically I know the geek stuff, but I don't know any of the human stuff. So I'm going to rely on you for a lot of that. I got to say, Zach, and I know you didn't mean it the way it sounds, but you mentioned the 2014 class, and I want to get that excited. And I feel like to phrase it for 2023, I thought it was JSN, Addison, Gibbs, and Bijan Robinson. I was really excited to draft outside of the quarterbacks, obviously. Right. And then some interesting stuff. And we thought it was a pretty deep class for that reason, frankly. And those pretty deep, interesting guys. So far, where I'm at, there's Neighbors Harrison. Brock Bowers, and then some interesting, and it feels thinner that way. And I know we agree up to what I've said so far, but I keep trying to get 2014 exciting, and I'm not. So what am I missing from your loose, not comparison, but loose reference?
So I think what you're missing maybe is 2014 didn't look quite like 2014. When we were in the kind of throes of it, and I wasn't doing evaluation at that point, but I was still playing, and it was people were excited about Mike Evans, and people were excited about Sammy Watkins, and people were excited about Odell Beckham, and then beyond that, it was like, all right, Matt Harmon liked the guy,
right?
You know, somebody else like. So it wasn't this. The kind of pantheon of classes that it became in the process. But for me, you've got Harrison and Neighbors at the top, like without question. And then there is a layer of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 7 players that I'm still interested in, that I still think have this, and this is just wide receiver. So for me, it goes Harrison, it goes Neighbors, and then there is a tier break, and then there's this really big flat tier, which is still in that same echelon of where a lot of tier 2 starts for other classes.
Right.
And it's Worthy, and it's Brian Thomas, and it's Rome Odunze, and Tez Walker, and Ladd McConkey, and Troy Franklin, and Malachi Corley, and like you have this great big huge swath of I'm still interested in these guys, which there hasn't been. I mean, you looked at last class, right? I'm still interested in these guys was 2 players, maybe 3. Right. And then you had I'm throwing darts beyond that. So
running back mostly,
yeah. And so
and
like
tight end.
For me, this class, and there are 2 tight ends, I think, in this class. To me, looking at it so far, it looks like there are 2 tight ends. There's Bowers, and there's the kid from Texas, and so it's a really strong class. It has 2 players, Neighbors and Harrison, who graded out in the top 10 for me since 2017, since I started really keeping track of my evaluations. It's just a lot of really good players. It's not the great players. There are a couple of great players, but 2014 was that way. 2014 was like a couple of great players, and then a whole bunch of like, man, these guys are pretty good.
Right. Speaking of Roma, we got to talk to people in a second, by the way, but we got like 3 questions. I got time. Okay. I thought I didn't like him. And I don't, not that I didn't like him. I thought everyone was going to like him a lot more than me, but I've done my once over, and now I'm going back over a few, and I've got him on the 3rd tier right now. I'm struggling to remember why. The notes I wrote on him don't really describe it either, because it's a fairly solid profile, and that's the first thing I've already noticed in my second look over. I'm like, this is something I'm learning about myself. I look to hate players or profiles at least. Well, I'm looking not to be hurt again. If you know what I mean? Like, why do I hate this guy?
You're going to but you're going to be more right more often if you just say everybody's bad. Because
yeah, absolutely,
the number of players hit, but to me it's
especially rookies,
there's this interesting kind of interplay where, because you have replenishing capital and you get draft picks every year, and so you get another kick at the can, and you can trade for draft picks, and so you can add that capital. To me, it's more important to find the players who I think can be moonshots, can be great, or can hit, than it is to not be wrong. And we're aiming for not being wrong, like we certainly are.
Yeah,
but I'd rather be wrong on a player that has a profile that I think can be Justin Jefferson than I would be right on a player who has a profile of, I don't know, name a wide receiver 3. Like, it just, I would rather shoot for those big misses than I would get hits that aren't ever going to start for me. Now, the flip side of that is you want to hit on your first round picks. Like, that's kind of, you lose capital for a year if you don't. And so there is some margin there, but I also think we overestimate our ability to hit this. It's just kind of a thing that happens. It happens in the stock market. It's behavioral economy. It's people overestimate their ability to predict the future, and especially once you start having a process and looking at numbers and that sort of thing, because ultimately there is so much that is luck or not predictable, or whatever you want to call it. So that I think that's where ironically enough, it's called prospect theory. But
I am listening. I'm just actively using this time of listening to correct my spelling in my notes of these wide receivers. So I feel like I'm being uber productive right now, which is pretty cool. Turns out I can't spell anything, but Google's helping me out. Genji, how you doing? I don't know if this comment is from last week or right now, but I appreciate it because I did set up the stream last week, and then I was like, nah.
I recognize that one from last week because I was in the. It may be a re-rack. I mean, Genji is pretty solid. He might be here again.
But he's pretty consistent.
But I know that was staring me in the face last week when I was sitting here trying to figure out how I was going to get into the stream.
Yeah, sorry about that. If it helps, it was a great nap.
I'm happy that you got you obviously needed it.
I was pretty happy after the nap until I saw my messages. I was like, wait. And I didn't notice till late. I was like sitting here at 2 a.m. going, oh, I'm definitely not catching up on that. It's Brian. Hey, well, I'm glad you can find us still. Went Lawrence over Kyler. Don't know if that was the right choice. Superflex went Lawrence over Kyler. No, I prefer Kyler over Lawrence, to be honest.
Yeah.
I just think he has more upside. I think he's finished with more upside as well. So.
Right, but that's going to be someone who's sitting there thinking, I can predict the future, and I'm not paying for past performance. I'm predicting Lawrence is going to be what everyone thought Lawrence was, when the best predictor of future performance is past performance. And we've seen Kyler be good every time he's been on the field, and we've seen Lawrence be not as good. Right. I mean, like he was pretty good 2 years ago. He was not great last year. He was not great a couple of years ago. So like he's been good, but he hasn't been Kyler good. Like to me, I would rather have the player that I have seen do it and am confident that will continue to do it.
Hey, you know what's going to help us out? Just being on my YouTube and Twitch, comments are going to be slower. We might actually be able to keep up a lot more. That's what I keep thinking. Hey, look at all those party hat guys. They're cute around Dave. Funky. I thought it was, funky's the right word for that, I think. Troy Franklin and Xavier Worthy season. I actually really like both, actually. I've got Franklin a little lower down. I've got him 8th overall, but that's mainly because I'm trying to be realistic in terms of draftability, and the expectations of landing spot draft capital just have to come under a few players. But I've got him in a tier of players I really think are NFL viable, and there's a lot of upside there. Let's see what I said about Franklin. Discount CD Lamb. So too long didn't read of it in a profile sense. Nowhere not that good, but it's of that ilk. Like a really good player playing an important role that translates to the NFL pretty well. And I liked him a lot. He's just, let me see. High-end comps are probably more Pittman and Juju, which is a mix of a barrel right now. Oregon in the Pac-12, have I got that right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a little hit and miss NFL-wise. You know. But I still like Franklin a lot. Pretty well. And as for Xavier Worthy, yeah, I like him too much, probably. I couldn't restrain myself from putting him 3rd overall. Like, I noted that this might be a profile that I'm just blind to, but that guy was really, really productive as much as I can realistically look at it relative to his role. And it's high A, high slot, which is a weird group. Looking for hits, it's Darnell Mooney, it's Zay Flowers recently, and outside of that, it's a little thin on the ground in terms of hits or how well it translates to the NFL or how often. But he was so good at
it. It's funny. So this is probably talking a little bit out of school, but you and I have the same top 6. Which is really weird because you and I come from this process from totally different directions, and to arrive at the same place is I may just throw out all my notebooks and start over. Like
I've only looked at them once, and I've only got through 14 players, and something I was trying to emphasize, and I don't know I was able to emphasize it quite enough. There are so many players to considering in this draft class compared to previous ones. And I've been doing it a minute. I got like 30 guys. They're just names on a spreadsheet at this point. And people keep telling me more to add that actually have numbers and played in realistic colleges. And I'm like, I don't know. I like this class very much. This looks like work.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah. I like both of them.
And it's fun. So you said discount CD Lamb for Troy Franklin, huh?
Profile wise, it's a similar role, and how productive he was, if I'm being optimistic, compares to CD Lamb and some other guys like Pittman.
It's weird for me because Franklin, the way Franklin plays, at least for me watching him, is totally different than either of those two players, which is funny how like the numbers can show one thing and watching a player shows a totally different thing. But like to me, he's a super vertical threat. Like he's a downfield can get over the top with speed. He's great at tracking the ball deep. Has very, very sound hands. So he's a hands catcher. So like when I talk hands catching, and since this is a video medium, it's a little easier to do this. But like he's making plays where he is going to the ball and catching the ball away from his body. Because if you let the ball travel in, the ball can either hit your body or a defender can get their hand in a lot easier. So he's kind of using his body to protect against the defender, reaching, meeting the ball. He does that really well. He's got great body control and will adjust to bad balls. So like Bo Nix wasn't always spot on. Like he had a great year, and don't get me wrong, he was a good quarterback at Oregon, but Troy Franklin made some really great adjustments, made some plays, and he's really quick off the line of scrimmage, which again contributes to him being a deep threat. To me, the things that I don't love is, 6'2", 170, he's repeatedly bothered by contact. If you're a physical defender, you can steer him off his route, and if you can do that, that means he's not getting a target, or the target is not an accurate target because he's not where he's supposed to be. He struggles a little bit with press coverage. So like he's quick off the line, but he's not quick off the line if someone's getting hands on him. So he kind of needs to be either moved around the formation or played somewhere where a team is playing zone and not getting up and playing that press coverage. And for my money, he's not a yak player. Like he doesn't get yards after the catch. And that was one of the things that CD Lamb was so good at, was yards after the catch. And he often gets, when he makes a catch, is not quick to transition to a runner. And so the initial defender that's with him is able to take him down. And so like, again, Franklin is great. Like he's not a bad player. He's in this group of the 7 guys who are after the top 2 that I'm really interested in.
Same.
But it's a profile. It's like it's going to be a little more difficult for him to drive a ton of targets than some of these other players.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm not obviously evaluating how they play, but I am hoping to get close to. I want to compare players accurately based on the way they play the game somewhat. And so I'm trying to pay attention increasingly after everything else runs, and I've looked through profiles and compared them. I'm trying to look at making, not comps, but looking at how they did in relatively similar roles. And one of the main ways I'm doing it outside of slot and ADOT is just checking out if they're above or below average in contested target percentage. And that's the kind of thing that's trying to group players. So that's interesting. I do have yards after catch as well, so maybe you should take a look at that more often when I'm doing that part of it. That might help bring me up some better examples. 12 team Superflex 1 point PPR, start 10. Have Stroud, Russ, Carr, Chase, AJ Brown, Puka. Okay. Amon-Ra, St. Brown, Lockett, HA. Is this just a showing off?
Do you sell Stroud for Dak and the 107? And then try to sell Carr and the 107? I don't think the
107 is high enough for me to trade down that.
But so Flow Source is trying to like flip. So he's trying to get Dak, like tier down to Dak, and then tier up with what you got with Dak to tier up to another quarterback to try to sell Derek Carr. It depends on.
I think
it's a lot of moving pieces.
Yeah, and I don't know your end result. I'm trying to think of your end result here. I like the idea of flipping the hype, don't get me wrong, but you're not going to get up anywhere back near Stroud. Like Stroud's in a tier that you're just not going to, like Dak's the tier you might be able to tier up to with Carr on the 107. So like hoping a dream for someone who hates Burrow now, or then you're winning. But I don't think you get that. Maybe Lawrence, but I think that's pie in the sky too. I mean, people hate Kyler. If you get that, then you've won at the end of the day. But it's all based on, is the guy in my league just undervaluing a seriously good quarterback, or I don't.
Yeah, like you would almost necessarily have to get. So you'd have to be able to get for Carr in the 107. You'd have to be able to get up into Kyler Murray, Jordan Love,
but yeah,
to that
Tua,
that area, and I'm not sure you do.
I don't.
I'm not sure
you traded down too far. The 107 isn't.
Yeah.
I like the idea of using Dak, but the 107 just isn't enough, which translates to when you try and then flip the 107 into something higher, you're not going to get to where you want to get to have made it worth it. But I like the idea, thinking it through. I don't think it's good enough, but
rather than do that, Flo, why wouldn't you start looking at one of your quarterbacks plus one of your other pieces? I know it would be painful to give up Achane, but like you could do something like Russell Wilson or Derek Carr and give up Achane with them and probably get up into that Kyler Murray range, because Achane is a name that people are excited about. Yeah, and I think you're better off. I think you're better off with Stroud and Kyler, or Stroud and Dak, or Stroud and Jordan Love.
Most of the combinations you could come up with. So. And I like having Stroud and Dak, but I think to give up Stroud to get Dak.
No offense to Achane, but like he's far easier to replace than Stroud is. Like even if you get Dak, like it's just like his points are going to be easier to replace. There's going to be, another or two or three running backs that do similar. I mean, they probably won't score a touchdown every time they touch the ball. They probably won't have 60 yards on 3 carries, every game. But like, neither is Achane. Like you've seen, as efficient as he can possibly be, he will be good.
Running back's really interesting this year. It's another running back off season, which is another unusual off season, but it's always so running back with value seasons. I wanted CMC when everyone thought he was dead. And it wasn't that long ago that most people thought he was dead because he was too old and injured. And now it's Barkley. Achane's the opposite. He's a running back with value and youth, and I keep finding him in a player I'd rather get out on than the values I'm seeing. And I loved Achane coming in, especially where we got him in rookie drafts, and we all told you. We somewhat liked him. And and it's phenomenal high touchdown, but he's going to be good. That's why I keep saying David Johnson. Like I can't remember in the time I've been like my favorite running back is came into the league before I started really playing, But David Johnson, the guy in terms of following the process and following through the rookie drafts and picking him up and waiting for him to be good, favorite running back experience from a rookie draft. And I really like the guy as well as the player, if you know what I mean. The two separate both seemed awesome. And I was so rooting for him to make a comeback after one of the numerous injuries. And it never quite happened. And I'm not saying that's Achane's future, but that's what I keep coming back to when I think Achane's values. Like, I want to keep David Johnson, but the value with so many points was so fantastic after the initial NFL breakout. It was always a pretty good, interesting idea to add him to something and see what you could go and get elsewhere, like Zach's saying. And so that kind of stands out in your roster as well. If you're looking for an alternative, you by no means have to. But I think that's a solid option. You're welcome. You didn't even hear it, and you're saying thank you. Like maybe hear it first. I'm just saying. Sometimes we're not so good.
Joe a little tentative.
12-team Superflex start 11. Bryce Young, 201. The 106. Oh, Bryce Young and the 201 for the 106 in a Superflex. No, No. I think Young gets you a first-round pick pretty easily. By himself, he should get the 106 maybe plus. And if he just has to be pretty good or not, terrible next year, and he'll get you about the same level of pick a year later, even if he doesn't become exponentially better than he was this year. Honestly, that's the way quarterbacks work. So it feels like too little, honestly, for Bryce Young.
Yeah, and I would definitely hang on to Young, even though it was an inauspicious start. He didn't do anything to help himself, but Carolina also did not facilitate him being successful. The things that the things that Bryce Young needs to be successful is not to be rushed up the middle, because he is, for everything that he is not a player who likes to get outside of the pocket and create off platform. He looks
technically
like he
good.
Yeah, like he looks like he should want to do that, but he doesn't. He wants to stay in the pocket, and so this was my knock on him, or not knock, but my estimation of him last year was, if you watch Bryce Young, he is really susceptible to being rushed up the middle. I wish I could find it. I have a whole bunch of my my film notes from last year sitting over here on the table, but I don't have quarterbacks. But that was the film note, was he likes to get the ball out quick, and he doesn't like pressure up the middle. Well, Carolina did the exact opposite. You got receivers who need time to develop routes, so that you got rid of the only receiver that they had that could create quick separation. You traded him to get Bryce Young, and then your offensive line is in shambles too. And so is Bryce Young going to be a serviceable NFL quarterback? Is he going to be a good NFL quarterback? I don't know. But he certainly won't without a good offensive line and without players who get open quickly. It's very similar to me to Tua's first year, where everyone was starting to write off Tua because the Dolphins did not have quick separators. They had Devontae Parker, and they had I don't even remember, but they had a whole bunch of, maybe Kenny Stills was there. I don't know. There were a whole bunch of guys that were downfield players, but not quick separators. And as soon as they drafted, I'm losing my train of thought. Peter, very fast. J. Mike loved him. You keep talking about how he was a miss for you. It's ridiculous. It's like the best receiver outside of Tyreek Hill on the Dolphins. But anyway, so they drafted
Jalen Waddle.
Waddle, yeah. So I kept doing Jalen Darden, and I was like, it's not Darden. It's Jalen Waddle. So they drafted Jalen Waddle, and all of a sudden Tua's pop time, like time to pass, went from like 3 seconds to like 2.5, and then they got Tyreek Hill, and it's down to like 2.25. And that's where he's going to be successful. It's very similar with Bryce Young.
I take a lot of real world out of it when possible when dealing with Dynasty, because running to value is always going to be the safe bet. And look at me, I'm scared, right? I play scared. Bryce Young could be as trash as we saw last year, and you still got a year. Like I said, you should be able to trade him for a first this time next year, even if it was a mediocre to below average season next year. I think there's a little bit more in the Bryce Young arc. Just borrow everything Zach said for football sounding reasons for it, if you like. But you don't have to believe in it. You just have to know that the value arc for QB are pretty stable. They're rare. The potential of having a Justin Fields or even a Jordan Love always keeps some level of interest, even if the lower drafted in 4 years out, in the case of Jordan Love. And Fields, people keep doubling down, even though that's another, will the team ever quite use him right? Will the touchdowns ever be replaced by something that's more sustainable? And don't want to argue his 23 season right now, but that's kind of where I'm at on it. I'm going on the out still. So it doesn't look like Carolina's going to figure it out. And right now he's riding his skill, which is leading to unsustainable production. I still think unsustainable production. Because he's a really talented player, but the team needs to figure out, and I don't think the team's going to. So there's just remove all of that potential out of it. I think the value is going to be stable. And this is what I wrote up in my weekly column for DLF this season, all throughout the last quarter of the season. And it's what I ended the season on. It's my main note is that Bryce Young is like a safe. You can just put some value in. It could go up with any one of the scenarios working out, like Zach just said. I think I cut my forehead just talking to you all. Sorry about that. Or it could go sideways. The chance of it rocketing down is very minimal just because of the position, the age, the draft capital, and the fact that there are all these reasons and all these ways in which he could be successful based on how good he was in college. Zach, I'm going to have to get a Band-Aid. I really tore open a little...
No, you're good.
It's not serious. I think it looks worse than it is. It's just a little cut, but now it looks like I've been headbutted by some sort of...
This is Peter Howard playing through the pain. This is a football guy. But Joe,
I got this in a football game.
Yeah. So Joe, can I just want to go real quick and say, if you could trade Bryce Young straight for the 106, I would consider doing that because I think there's more insulated value in this class with the top three quarterbacks that are pretty obvious with Caleb Williams and Drake May and the Jaden Daniels out of LSU. I think that you've got two really easily identifiable wide receivers, and then you've got Brock Bowers. And so the top six should be very insulated. But I think adding that 201 is going to be too much for me based on this class, based on how the value that Bryce Young should hold, even if your league is kind of telling you that he doesn't, because if he comes back and plays any semblance of the way he should, that value is gonna rebound. So, all right, Genji, help me not draft Quentin Johnston and Marvin Mims. You kind of have to listen to the way we couch things, because if you listened last year, like we were on Quentin Johnston, but also had a tentativity about that profile, and
we at least firmly put him behind Zay Flowers, Addison, JSM. We didn't let you miss those, but we would have been ahead of. You're going to say Rashee Rice, but I think you would have respected that Johnson should go earlier in the draft, but you preferred Rashee Rice lower. And I said the same for Dell, but but we wouldn't have said, no, just trade back for Dell. Mims, I just outright would have told you to draft. Sorry.
But they're also like, to me, you can look at a profile and have them score highly, but also see the flaws in those profiles for fantasy football. And so, like, Quentin Johnston profile to me a lot like N'Keal Harry, a lot like Drake London, who's been fairly successful, a lot like some of these other players who don't necessarily get initial separation, because that wasn't what Quentin Johnston did. He was a vertical separator downfield or a bubble screen guy and make sure you get yards after the catch. But there was nothing in the middle two levels of the field. Now, Mims was downfield and incredible getting downfield, but there wasn't much else. And the last line of my write-up for Marvin Mims last year was something to the effect of, I think he's going to be more effective for an NFL team than he is for your fantasy team, because those two types of profiles don't drive a lot of targets. The guys who go downfield fast and the guys who go downfield and then jump up high are relying on big plays and they're relying on touchdowns. And so those two things don't happen as often as, say, an 8-yard slant and adding 2 yards on at the end of a catch. So it's not necessarily that they were bad players, and they scored highly, but they scored highly at things that don't necessarily translate to fantasy, at least for my evaluation. And so maybe I need to be better at watching for that and articulating that, because like that specific profile that Quentin Johnston fell into is a profile that I have learned to try to avoid. It's the player who looks like one thing but has to do something completely different to be successful, and it's hard to, I mean, it's hard for the NFL to do. It's hard for us to look at him and not dream on that big body wide receiver making plays down the field, but he's not separating other than vertically. And so I think that, Genji, to make a short point long, which I'm very, very adept at doing, is kind of listen to the way that we profile these players, not just where they're ranked, but also what we think about them as players. And I'll be descriptive. So like Peter will tell you, and this is kind of I have a writing background. And so for me, the numbers are kind of the plot. So Peter will tell you what happened. And then for me watching the film, I can tell you the kind of the character development. So I'll tell you how it happened. And so if you can marry those and listen, and you got to be smarter than I am, because and I'll fully admit it, like I'm going to be wrong on players. There are going to be players where I'll have a grade on them and I'll be kind of unsure. It was the Christian Watson thing a couple years ago. Christian Watson scored really highly in my grading, or higher than he probably should have in my grading. I think I had him at wide receiver 9, but he also did like 3 things just exceptionally well. And then everything else was kind of meh. And so it balanced out to a good score in the profile. But what he did was a little scary in terms of players that I gravitate toward.
That's actually why I've started to try and create these buckets as ways to visualize how players play in college and compare them to past players. Because Mims is in that Xavier Worthy bucket, and a few others that I've loved and a few that I've hated, where there's relatively lack of success following up, just based not on how everything Zach just said, but just based on the fact they're succeeding further down the field on average, in the slot above average as well, high slot, high ADOT. This is not a lot of successes. There are a few recently, and there are only like 6 that really passed the thresholds, but we have so few, it's hard to know if they're really the thresholds. That's what I was talking about in the podcast. Mims was past it so far, and yeah, at this point is a miss. But Zay Flowers and Donald Mooney both passed, and he's roughly where I've got Xavier Worthy in terms of area of the field who's succeeding at.
And Worthy is out of the top players that I've graded, is the one that scares me the most, because
right. And because we're kind of saying the same thing. Like I think this guy was great, but it's a little scary. I don't see that succeeding in the NFL very often, and that could just be real football stuff.
But he's driving targets at a rate, but doing something that shouldn't drive targets, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So like he's leading Texas in receptions and yards all 3 years he played, but plays down the field. Takes the top off the defense with speed, makes plays deep. He will find holes between levels of zones, which is a nice thing to have in your back pocket. He plays a little bit like Jordan Addison did to me last year. I don't think he's quite as good as Addison, but he has a similar type game, but a little smaller frame. And so it is like I have him graded out as wide receiver 3. But if you ask me what player I am nervous about, it's Xavier Worthy.
Yeah. And it's not. And that's where It's like with Mims. I straight
yeah.
up would have drafted Mims too. I had him right next to, I just looked him up. I had him 8th overall post-draft, right next to Rashee Rice, but below Tank Dell. I mean, that feels like a win, but I mean, not really. I was same tiering him with Rashee Rice. I really liked him, but rolling in that little caution, like if you you also happen to really like Rashee Rice, that might have tilted you that way. And it could be helpful. I'm just trying to be as realistic as possible on the inability to really decide which one's a hit, which one's a failure there. But after the fact, it feels like, oh, that could have helped me, but I wouldn't chase it. Like to the point, this year, Xavier Worthy's in the bucket. It's a 0%. That's a cautionary thing. But I still like what he did with that role so well. He's 3rd for me right now. So I'm cautious on it. I'm not going to chase it. And I might draft him over maybe Brian Thomas hits, Roma Dunze hits, and after the fact, he'll be like, oh, I should have listened to the bucket. But it's not a deciding factor. It's just a note to know. And that helps you gauge your risk on, do I trade up? Do I trade down? Based on the trades that you can get, if you know what I mean. That's why I think the best way to gauge it. Not predicting the future, but having the best risk assessment. Who I like in the best order I can come up with. And I do think I'm getting increasingly good at that, as we all try to. And then knowing the risks of Worthy could be great, could be pretty okay, he could be terrible, and not many players, although a few recently, have been succeeding being great in that role, but we don't. And so you have the full picture to make the best dart throw you can. And I think, as far as I can tell, that's the best I can do to try and help out. It's the best I can do to try and help myself out so far, at least.
Yeah,
like that's the honest way I'm approaching
it. And that's and the other one, like we already talked about Troy Franklin. Like I'm worried about Troy Franklin as an NFL player again because it's almost completely vertical threat. So you're relying on getting down the field. You're relying on big plays. You're relying on touchdowns. And it's really hard to. I mean, those are the big value plays, but they're also the least likely to be successful. So, like, it's great when it hits, but it's not as likely to be successful. Which is always the funny thing. Like, everyone's will follow air yards, which is great. Like I understand. Like they're getting targets, so they're seeing. And it's a matter of time before one connects. But for me, my brain doesn't connect that as being reliable. Like if you're getting the ball down the field, that's awesome because it's high value plays. Yeah.
At a much better level that you've never played at before. Yeah. You have to be Calvin Johnson. You have to, and that's a really hard thing to do. And I will say something I can add to that, not take away from it, but like tack on at the end. And something I tried to say in the podcast this week, although it felt like a rambly episode. High ADOT. The NFL also loves Calvin Johnson and spends oodles of draft capital chasing that kind of profile, as far as I can tell. And so Troy Franklin is a risk, but he also might get top 3 draft capital. And pre-draft, that's really interesting to know for a guy, I think.
Keon Coleman
is talked about as neighbors. So you can put that in your quiver. This guy is a risk, but right now being interested in him might have some value. You might end up just doing a little tiny trade up tiers and end up in a range where he's there, and then someone people actually care about talk about him, like JJ Zacharyson or Mac Harmon, and suddenly they want that pick. And you were just in there a little earlier because you could have expected maybe they'll throw him at least 3rd round draft capital because this is a high ADOT class. And while it's a lower hit group versus high slot low ADOT, they're drafted at about the same rate, which is why I say it's a high draft capital class, because the NFL loves drafting this lower hit rate group. Yeah. And so could get 3rd round draft capital despite that risk. And suddenly you find your picks are migrating to areas that people get much more excited about after the draft. I'm not saying that for sure. Like, I'm not going to predict the picks that you want. But I think if we have realistic expectations with how players play, how well they hit, then we can just hopefully find ourselves doing the right moves and in the right place more than 50% of the time. Like, that's my whole goal. And so maybe that works out for us. Just being interesting in Franklin now, and then maybe he gets drafted in the 3rd, and people are like, that guy's high ADOT. You should see these highlights. You should see what he can do downfield. The NFL he's really going to thrive in Denver or wherever he actually lands. And suddenly, because you were interested earlier, you were like, I'm pretty interested. He might get third round draft capital. I want this mid-second, this extra mixed second, just because he might turn up there, or even early third. And suddenly you have an asset that rises even before the season gets here. Yeah, it's pie in the sky stuff, but I think if we move towards that kind of process and try and get better and better at it, like I said, hopefully we'll end up there more and more. Anyway, we really went on Marvin Mims here.
Well, but this is the type of class that I love to be in the first round. And like I have right now, I have a couple leagues where I have like 106 and 108 or 107 and 109. Like, and those are going to be fun picks because I don't believe there's going to be consensus after the top two. I think you're going to see a lot of people put Odunze at 3, but not everybody. I think you're going to see a lot of people moving Franklin up. I think you're going to see a lot of people moving Brian Thomas up. I think you're going to see there's going to be a late, probably from film, Tez Walker push because he does some pretty incredible things on film.
If you
but
like
he also, But he can do other things. So
we didn't see it play out.
He can play close to the line of scrimmage. He can quick release. He can beat press coverage. He's got kind of an inside out move, and then he's got like a jab cross step move that he gets off press with. He's really good in space against zones. He'll sit in the open areas, which is how you beat a zone, or depending on how he reads the safety, he will get over the top because he's fast enough to do that. He does get over the top against man consistently too. So like he's big, he's 6'3", like 180 and fast. So if you watched the Senior Bowl at all, you saw him drop like 3 balls over the top, but he got wide open over the top and then just kind of got tangled with the corner. I'm not worried about drops. I'm watching him get over the top again and again and again and again and again throughout his film from Kent State all the way to Carolina. And I mean, he does that consistently. The things that he doesn't do are improvise. Like if you tell him to run a route, he's going to run that route. And so like if he goes out and he's supposed to run a hitch, and the defender is playing up on him, he's still going to run the hitch. If he goes out and the defender is giving him like 15 yards of cushion and he's supposed to run a 9 route, he still runs a 9 route, even though the defender's over the top and has got leverage. So like those things aren't great, but I think that's coachable as opposed to like physical traits and talent, which he had. Like, I think you can teach a guy to think the game, but I don't think you can teach a guy to react to the game. If that makes sense.
I think it's still going to be difficult. Thinking the game at speed is almost a trait or a talent.
Well,
I know what you mean. It's more
not even at speed. It's just like
trainable.
Okay, you're going to do this, as opposed to like giving him the ability to say, okay, if you see this, then this, as opposed to him just going out and being like, all right, I'm going to run a curl no matter what. And like
give him 2 options.
Even with Tez Walker, like he doesn't come back to the quarterback unless it's a curl. And so like the quarterback can be in trouble and can be like moving the pocket and trying to buy time to get somebody open, and he's running the route that he was supposed to run.
He's in the end zone.
It's like, dude, like when you see that happen, when you see the play breakdown, you got to come back and make. But there's so much there, and he also like I don't know how much you know backstory about Tez Walker, but like he came into college in 2019, had a knee injury, so he had a year deferred. He was at East Tennessee State, transferred to North Carolina Central. Their season got canceled in 2020. So then he transferred again to Kent State. He played the entire season, got 5 passes. Okay. But he had 5 catches for 124 yards and a touchdown. in Kent State's bowl game, he had 74 yards and a touchdown. So he had like 80% of his production in the bowl game against the best competition that they faced all year. The next year he led the team, and then he comes over to Carolina, transfers to Carolina. The NCAA governing board was like, whoa, you can't do this. It's a double transfer. But he didn't actually play his second year in school because it was a COVID season. So it really wasn't a second. So then they were like, oh, well, you sat out 4 games, but you can play now. So he sat out a third of the season and was still third on the team in receptions, second on the team in yards, and first on the team in touchdowns in a third fewer games than everybody else played. Like, he just dominated that team, but you don't, unless you have the context, you don't.
Well, that's
realize.
also why I kind of like I don't per game. I'll never per game, per game, anti-per game for life. But here's the thing. The reason I didn't like someone like, to pull a name, Atran, because there have been a few, but Terrence Marshall, who was really high drafted and probably has immense talent, to be fair. What I didn't like about his profile was it looked good if you per game, not because he missed a lot of time, but because there were his production is built on 3 games, even though there were other games that he played. And I was like, that's just fucking weird. That's different than playing 8 games and being good in all 8.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean. But anyway, talk about high ADOT. But he did run 30 routes per game in his highest points per game season, which is significant volume for a guy that's got like a 17 ADOT career average, which is pretty high. But I haven't ranked just same place as you.
Yeah.
Just under Rome.
Yeah.
Because the upside's there. I was going to ask you a question from outside the chat. Have you ever looked at, or do you plan to look at someone called Jamari Thrash?
Thrash. Yeah, I will, because you told me to look at him in a DM.
I was just curious. Yeah, I'm not going to tell you positive or negative, but I thought someone I didn't see on your list who was on mine. I was like, I wonder what you think of that.
So I have only had the bandwidth to watch. I've watched 17 wide receivers so far. I swapped over. I've watched 15 running backs. Right now, I am doing write-ups because I got to a point where, like, I started to watch Brock Bowers and I got like 3 games in and I'm like, my eyes are crossing. I gotta do something else for a little bit. And so I'm going back and doing the write-ups so that I can do the Dynasty Dummies hootenanny and have something to actually say that sounds clever, like I planned it, as opposed to like riffing off the cuff like this and forgetting Jalen Waddle's name. Yeah. So
never sound clever here. That's not what
absolutely not. Yeah. So but yeah, I will watch Thrash, especially if and I don't know who asked that, but if you mention that we're going to do the Dynasty Dummies rookie hootenanny, we're going to start on the 22nd of February. So we got a couple more weeks before that starts. I figured if we didn't start on Valentine's Day, that would probably be good if I can promote harmony in the households of the other 2 guys that I'm doing the show with. We'll all benefit. So we're going to start it on the 22nd. We're going to do 2 wide receiver shows. So we're going to do 12 wide receivers, whoever we think the top 12 are, or maybe we'll pull rankings from somewhere. The top 12 running backs. And then we'll do a tight end and quarterback show. And then we do what we call a catch-all, where we like ask people, hey, who did we miss? Who would you like to hear? And if we get enough interest, we'll go do a catch-all show. Last year we did 2 or 3 catch-all shows because there were a ton of players that people wanted to hear about. We had to get all the way down to where we were talking about Puka Nacua before people were happy. So
Genji's basically Gronk. That's the easiest way.
He's tiny,
all my
but
answers
he's not.
To these suck.
I don't know if you'll like him though, because he's not tall. He's 6'3", like 240. Like, he's not tall.
I do big. Like my height, weight, athleticism thresholds for tight end, but I haven't profiled him exactly yet, but I did look through him.
Stupid productive.
He's as dominant as a tight end as Evan Ingram and the other fella, Kyle Pitts, was as a receiver playing tight end, if you know what I mean.
Blocks.
His overall tight end score is heavily biased towards receivers in my model because that's what it knows to go look for, with a little basis towards athleticism and the height and weight thing like Zach just mentioned, because tight ends are freaking weird. That actually matters at tight end. Nowhere else at all. But there it's like, I don't know, I guess weight and height. Okay. But if you scan through his years, he's like the team. And that's incredibly impressive for a tight end not playing at this receiver type role. So, yeah, he was. The reason I hate answering these questions as a nerd, because it makes it sound like I'm authoritative or there are definite thresholds. But the simple way of saying is, here are the numbers at all the predictive metrics. There's only like 3, and he is 25 to 50% above all of them. Yeah. That's the answer from my perspective, is like, this is what all the good players did and the few that they have in common most of the time, and he's overhit. Like, that's it.
And for me, like, I was watching Ladd McConkey, right? And watching Brock Bowers by accident, even though I'm watching Ladd McConkey, because you'd have plays where it would be like a series of 3 plays where they would run twice to Brock Bowers' side, and he would set the edge. He would absolutely plant a linebacker, or he would absolutely plant a defensive end. And then the third play, he comes out and like chips, and then goes and runs a route and just absolutely abuses the linebacker, makes a catch in the middle of the field, adds 5 yards after the catch. And you're just like, this is a tight end who just laid 2 blocks in consecutive plays, and then went out and did the Kyle Pitts, Evan Ingram, the exactly what you want for a pass catcher. So the things that, to me, if you look at, and I know everybody wants to gravitate toward Pitts and they want to gravitate toward Ingram, they wanted to make Fant something. To me, the reason why you like to have a tight end who can line up in line, and I know people are going to crap on Travis Kelce. He does that. Even though he's not a great blocker, he is serviceable enough that they don't take him off the field. When you get into the red zone, which coincidentally is where the end zone is, which is where it's easiest to score big swaths of points.
I did not know that.
If you don't have a tight end who can block, you either have to design a play specifically for that tight end, which now the offense sees, oh, look, we have a tight end who can't block. They're going to pass, or you take him off the field. Whereas if you have a tight end who can line up in line and block, you can run that little chip and you can run him outside. You can do the Travis Kelce thing where you put him in motion and throw the little pop pass to him. You can score touchdowns because they're on the field blocking, as opposed to having to Kyle Pitts it from, the 17, where, like, it's great. Like, he's still good. And don't get me wrong. And I expect him to be back in the good graces of the Dynasty community this year, because Art Smith is gone, and he's a good player. He will draw targets. He will score points. But the easiest way to score points is in the red zone, and the easiest way to be involved in the red zone is to be a dual threat tight end.
And that's the aspect I will add to it from a value nerdy. What's an end zone? Literally, I couldn't point to it.
It's got the paint, Pete.
Jacob Rickroad's tweet, still my favorite way of alliterating this. None of that matters. He can be good, he can bad. Just forget caring about it. You've just seen what they've done with Kyle Pitts. You've literally just seen it. His price is only now becoming reasonable. What would have been reasonable the last 2 years, after these last 2 years. And the thing is, that's okay. It's actually a good idea to have fallen down the Kyle Pitts trash hole, even though we warned about it the whole way. And my favorite way of alliterating this is Jacob Rickroad had a tweet once, which was something like, if you told me the next Gronkowski was in this draft, he would do nothing but draft tight ends from 101 all the way down to the 4th round, just hoping he catches him. Not with even any grand idea that I know how to calculate it, because that Kelsey and Gronk and Graham, and that's the rarity. Like, it's rarer than Mahomes and Allen, guys. Like, it's the thing that is as impossible to catch in your butterfly net. So if you tell me there's a chance of it, you throw the wall at it. And if you don't believe me, again, I'll refer back to my Kyle Pitts reference of how literally however much percentage of the Dynasty community literally just tried to do that for 3 straight disappointing years of Kyle Pitts. And they're going to do it with Bowers. And Bowers looks more like what the high T NFL crowd is going to like about tight end. He looks more like Gronk. He plays that role more, like everything Zach just said about Kelsey. And you can see that without, actually having any T. I can see that. So, yeah, that's outside of what actually makes him a good player. That's what makes him good in Dynasty. Like, 5th overall should already be a reasonable consideration for Brock. Just getting, halfway into the wide receiver class, I'm like, yeah, 5th is very reasonable for that tight end that everyone's going to love without even having looked too deeply at the profile. I think that. Anyway, so I'd say those 2 answers to why that's so good from Dynasty, and also, whatever Zach said about how players play or whatever. Genji, did you find this year's Tank Dell yet? Xavier Worthy, maybe? It could very reasonably fall into that value range, and I'd be very excited to draft in there, hopefully.
It's funny because that was the...
Well, it might be this year's Marvin Mims. Like, genuinely, I want to keep pointing that out because I'm gonna fall into this hole, and there might be a goal down there, or I might just be in a hole. Like, follow me at your... Make your own opinions, but I want to chase that.
It's going to be Xavier Worthy is too small. You're going to hear this. Xavier Worthy is too small. If he gets taken in the first 2 rounds of the NFL draft, he obviously produced at Texas. He led the team all 3 years in everything that you'd want him to lead in as a wide receiver. Like, he is good. And the problem with looking at BMI, and like there are a bunch of BMI tweets about
I love
Devontae Smith.
What happens is like the easiest discount.
Well,
like take that every time. Thank you very much.
My write-up, because I just did this, and Peter, I dropped it in the DM with you, but like my write-up with Xavier Worthy starts out with survivorship bias and the example that's always used in game theory, but it actually started out in World War II, where the government was trying to figure out like what they needed to do because all our planes were getting shot down by the Luftwaffe, and they were like, all right, we're going to get some math nerds in here, and we're going to figure out where we need to put the armor. And so they looked at all the planes that came back, and all the bullet holes were like riddling the wings, and they're riddling the tail. And so they're like, yeah, we gotta put armor on the wings and the tail. And then this guy speaks up from the back, and he's like, no. And they're like, what do you mean? And he's like, the planes that aren't coming back are the ones that you need. Yeah, are the ones that got hit in the engines and had major catastrophe. And so those are the ones you need. That's where you need to put your armor. And to me, you're like, don't look at the players who didn't do what all of these outliers that make the NFL did. You can't point to all the players who didn't make it and say, oh yeah, well, obviously these guys are terrible. Like, there aren't very many players who look like Xavier Worthy or Devontae Smith or Tank Dell. But the players do, huh? Did
Marcus
you say
Brown was another BMI guy?
Yeah, but like there aren't very many players who do that, because most players who are that small aren't good enough to produce to get to the NFL and be drafted highly enough for us to care. But the guys who do are good.
So Zach just made a very logical argument. Allow me, the non-nerd, to make an emotional wheel. I am nothing if not a terrified human being with no teeth. Let's say, look at me. I'm terrified of everything. I make the safest decision possible constantly. I have never once been scared of height, BMI, like I have none of it. Like I don't care about I can never know combine numbers and still have the same opinion and have hit at the same rate. Like it's literally irrelevant, except for maybe a little bit on tight end. You can literally ignore it. Or think this: just never like a player more or less than you already do based on it. And you don't have to chase the small guys. You don't have to chase Tank L. You don't have to draft him higher than you want to. You just have to not move it based on how big he is. And everyone else moves for you. Because no one will believe me. I guess so no one will believe it. And it's literally true. It does not matter. It's not that it doesn't matter, it's that it's already adjusted for. That's a nerdy way of saying for it. If he's getting drafted here, if he's playing in the NFL, it's already adjusted for. He got there. He already beaten that curve.
Yeah.
It's like saying, no guys as skinny as you make it to the NFL. It's like, yeah, sure. But the only one who did was Devontae Smith. It's already adjusted for. All the guys skinny as me that aren't Devontae Smith weren't fucking in the NFL already. He's already beaten his way up through that impossible arc to get there. Even Tutu Atwell did not die on the field and actually had a few good games this year. And that guy's the size of a small toddler, I've been told. So, you literally just don't change your opinion on a player based on it, and everyone else does the changing for you, and therefore you profit. Like you do nothing, win. That's the best deal I've ever heard of. Sometimes because lots of players miss no matter what their height. Again, some don't work out. Zach Harris, how do you guys feel about Trevor Lawrence?
I'm jealous.
About this a little bit. He does have a head of hair on him. Let's face it. I feel like he is a buy. I don't see how Jacksonville doesn't keep him. I don't think he's going anywhere, but perhaps. I think, as always, a safe bet. I think it's somewhere in the middle. He was a top 12 quarterback that breakout year. I expect him, based on his draft capital, college profile, top 12 is consistently top 12 is more than in his range of outcomes. But like Dak Prescott, who's constantly bounced around in that value, that's not Mahomes, Allen, Kyler Murray type value, or Lamar Jackson for that matter. The difference with Dak is that he's actually had that kind of production and is constantly pushed into the top 12, which has been phenomenal for Dynasty. Trevor Lawrence is just kind of that guy, though. I've always kind of felt like that about Joe Burrow as well. Like I've never seen that top 5 output be consistent like a Kyler Murray or but really good top 12 guy who's going to play for a decade and 2 decades. I'm trying to come up with a comp. I can't. Phil Rivers and Eli Manning kind of come to mind. Like that's the medium range of outcomes with Lawrence. I'm pretty happy with having that for as long as quarterbacks play. At his current value, like you say, he's probably a better value right now. But don't buy in thinking, and he will therefore turn into one of those top 5 guys. Is it still in his range of outcomes? For sure. He's an incredibly impressive player, but we're grading on a scale here, and I haven't seen anything to think we should expect him to jump up into that top percentile range of outcomes. But I think it's very good. Yeah. I mean, it sounds too simple to be true, but those are also probably the best answer.
Like the ceiling expectation has been pulled down. Instead of being a 3-story house, we now have like a 2-story house with dormers. And
I feel like I was kind of there after that top 12 season, though. It's like top 12 is different than top 5, but top 12 is great. Yeah, and it's nice to see people tilt on what was, frankly, a terrible year. And that was him. I mean, Zach and other people can probably talk about how it's maybe not entirely all his fault because you've got utilization. A lot happens on a football field that isn't what the player can alter, he seems to have played badly on top of that.
He also got fairly seriously injured and continued to play like high ankle sprain. I know this because I was watching the game, and I was watching the game with my my brother-in-law, and like we couldn't believe that I messaged him the next week. And I was like, Trevor Lawrence is playing this week, and we're like,
and like I wrote him off. I was like, and he won't be playing this year, and had to go back in. this week, and I had to go back and edit it, and I was like,
and so like yes, it was a down year, but also context. And so yeah, Zach, like he is a buy because the community does what the community does, where we have to run things out to the nth degree. So right now, everybody is running past the mark on the negative side of Trevor Lawrence, and so you can extract value because everybody else is going to be too low. And then if he does something good, everybody's going to run back by the other way because of the initial evaluation out of college. And maybe you can try, like, to me, that's how to play the micro markets, is get in when everybody else is running by. That's when you make whatever move it is that you're going to make.
I think that's why I have such a hard time bouncing around. It feels like when I was involved. Now I'm at the game apparently. I'm not in the popular group.
You look good though.
Bouncing around as I did, because I truly the best answer to do it more accurately more often is in the middle somewhere. And now there's some people are fantastic at zigging and zagging and choosing when to go left and choosing when to go right. And I figured out by following it a little bit, you move a little bit to the left, you move a little bit to the right, but mostly tracking through the center. That's just an idiot who doesn't do phenomenal at these wild guesses / predictions of when to go left and right, and when someone's going to be Puka Nacua and when someone's going to be, the opposite. You actually end up with more positive results over time fairly effectively. And all you have to do is just trend and track in the middle a little bit. It's boring sounding, and you don't get the highs and lows as I used to enjoy, like everyone else, of just hitting that once in a million shot. But the other thing is, I think it works better in a dynasty format where those highs and lows end up not building your team over time, which is ultimately what you need to do, or constantly reinforcing your team. Yeah. It's like if your hit this year was Puka Nacua, what you get out of it is you now have to give this guy away. That's how you get the value out of it if you threw too much at it to do it, or you've consistently been trying to make that shot. And so now's your opportunity to turn all those misses around, because most of them will have been misses if you're following that way, just because the nature of odds. And that sucks. Whereas if you were just constantly tracking left and right, then you got Jordan Addison, pretty positive season, and maybe you grabbed Rashee Rice on Zach's advice, or Tank Dells on JJ Zacharyason's advice, and you're pretty good. You've advanced, you've moved forward, and you don't have these wild highs and lows, which ultimately don't consistently reinforce and improve your points per game, essentially, as well as your value. But we've gone way to the left of your question here. But I think that's what I take away with a lot of these Trevor Lawrence value swings and value swings in general. It's don't chase the swings, just accurately track a little bit to the left. Okay, Trevor Lawrence, a little bit less valuable, but I'm still pretty happy to trade for him in this range. And where you get him, you'll do it at a fairly reasonable price, which will strengthen your team appropriately, rather than trying to go throw Trevor Lawrence away desperately. And in the odd chance that he's traded to another team and doesn't play another full season in the NFL, you're like, ha, I got out just in time. But most of the time, he's like, again, median is Eli Manning, Phillip Rivers, pretty good, going to give you great stretches. And for 2 decades, like that's going to help your team out more if you just consider that the most likely range of outcome. I don't know. Maybe I'm just tired. But some of that made sense to me. Romeo Dunce is good. Yeah, I actually think he's pretty good. I really look in my memory. I was like, this is a guy I'm going to be lower on. And I might end up being. But when I went and I started to do my second look, I was trying to reread through it for the podcast and other stuff. I was like, what don't I like about this? And honestly, most of it's pretty positive. It's not. It's number go green syndrome. It didn't Xavier Worthy. It's like, wow, that's amazingly high compared to the average. Romeo Dunce did what he should do, where he should do it, to be a very successful NFL player and hopefully fairly successful fantasy relevant player. Tyreek Hill, he ain't. Cooper Kupp, he ain't on either end of the ways that we mainly divide fantasy players, volume guy, efficiency guy. But he's pretty good at the efficiency guy thing. He's going to be, looks like he should be pretty good in the NFL. I'm like, I don't not like anything. I just, number go green syndrome. He looks pretty good. Yeah. high A dot, low slot, but his A dot is mid as well. It's not like he's getting all of his yards on huge chunk plays. It's not like a 17 A dot, 3 years with 30 routes per game. It's like a fairly respectable high A dot and low slot, which was under 20%, which is fairly normal. As a rule, let's see. Below average prospect overall. When you look at the cohort, however, his comps within his profile component, again, he's slightly above or on the line or slightly below most of the successful comps at that role. Awesome. That's good. Yeah, pretty interesting play. I think what it is I've seen a lot, like you may have, like he's my third overall. Like, love this guy. A very fair opinion. Yeah, I think he's good, but that makes it sound like I'm going to go draft the next Mike Evans. I'm like, I'm not already Mike Evansing him. But yeah, he's a pretty good player that down the field thing. Yeah.
But I think some people are. Like, I think some people are running him out to, and that's
again, what makes me think I don't like him. But he's actually pretty good at it.
Like, and that's going to be the. I mean, we're going to echo this with this class because, again, for me, there are 7 players that are good that I'm interested in. There are 2 players that I'm going to go out of my way to try to acquire. I'm going to go out of my way to try to acquire Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Neighbors. Like those
Harrison Neighbors, right?
So
that's the order you would draft it.
Yes, I do. But and I tweeted this out the other day. I took a little bit of flack for it, but I have the explanation. But I said, like, I have Marvin Harrison graded out as the 3rd overall player out of my 2017 to now ranks. Like, it literally goes CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, Marvin Harrison. But Malik Neighbors is in the top 10. And if in 4 years you come to me and say, hey, Marvin Harrison was a complete bust, like if you're from the future and show up, first, I'm going to ask you, well, how come I can't get a time machine now? Because I if you have one in the future, I want it now. But then I'm not going to be surprised that, or as surprised that Marvin Harrison busted as I would be if you came and told me that Malik Neighbors busted, because of the way they play, because of the way the NFL plays, because of what's successful in the NFL more often. I think I see more players like Malik Neighbors
and factually true
than I do Marvin Harrison. And Marvin Harrison
for fantasy
can be and should be successful.
Yeah.
But to me, there is a greater risk and there's a greater upside because I think he's a better player. But what we score in fantasy, I will be a lot less surprised if he busts than I will be if Malik Neighbors does.
I think it's another position, like the 4 positions, fallacy, I want to say, because you've got like 1 in 17 prospects that are Marvin Harrison succeed.
Right.
But of the 10 in the last 20 years prospects who have succeeded, all of them played as well as Marvin Harrison, which makes it feel like 100% bucket, pretty close to it, in the Harrison bucket, where you've got the Neighbors bucket, which is like, 10 out of 40 succeed.
Right.
And again, once you get into that bucket, well over 75% of the prospects who succeed look like Neighbors, or as good or worse than Neighbors at that role in college. And so you're not comparing the two directly, you're comparing them how likely are they to be successful at the respective group, and you've divided them into separate rooms at that point. It's not wide receiver versus wide receiver almost. If that makes
it, no, it does. No, Peter, like that makes perfect sense, and it makes perfect sense the way like I watch film, because to me, you say wide receiver, but to me there are like 5 different archetypes of wide receivers, and Marvin Harrison wide receiver is totally different than Malik Neighbors wide receiver. Like Marvin Harrison plays a lot more like name the like Des Bryant or T. Higgins, or like the contested catch guy, the bully, the red zone monster. Mike Evans is another example of that. Like, he's that type of player. I think he's a little faster. I think he's like a souped up version of some
He's a
of those
different person.
guys. Yeah.
Yeah.
But Neighbors plays the role more like Garrett Wilson or not Justin Jefferson, but Justin Jefferson. Like, he's playing that role where he can do multiple things. You can slide him inside and he can create separation with quickness, which I don't think that Marvin Harrison can. Like, Marvin Harrison can create separation with speed. He can create separation with pace and savvy, which he does a lot. Like, he's very intelligent with the way he runs routes. He can win by just absolutely bullying you because he is bigger and stronger than you are, and he does that sometimes, and then just kind of looks down at the corner and laughs. Like, but it's a different game, and I see more players like Neighbors succeed than I do Harrison.
It's just playing simple and playing
Both
smart,
awesome,
but accepting that there are 3 oscillating axes, not 2, not an X and Y graph. Yeah, it's like just the percentages, and honestly, the little buckets I'm putting them in, like 70% of players in Harrison's bucket succeed, and again, most of them who don't have some weird kind of context to their story, Harrison or lower. Like, Harrison looks fantastic,
yeah,
but 40%. Of Neighbors bucket succeed. So it sounds like you're saying Neighbors better than Harrison, but they're in different buckets at this point. I'm dividing one by 200 and one by 25. Like, those two percentages are out of a different thing, not wide receiver. And then when you can, but also that 40% group is a lot more consistently drafted, a lot more consistently hit, at least at a base level for fantasy purposes. And so that's good. So it sounds like you're saying it's better than Harrison. No, because over here you have literally Calvin Johnson. And then you've got the third and fourth axis, time making fools of us all. Imagine liking Evans over Odell Beckham in the rookie draft, feeling stupid. And then Evans hitting slightly after Odell Beckham and thinking, okay, I've gained ground. And then, how many years are we after? Which was it better to have? Odell or Mike Evans at this point? Probably Mike Evans, I guess. And so that peak was pretty strong. And so time evens it all out. We're looking over this huge time frame to make those percentages even work. And so, yeah, multiple, I don't know, it makes sense in my head to not tilt too hard of a simple percentage when we're talking about buckets and time, and then you've got one player's career or Odell Beckham's career arc destroying it, whereas Mike Evans' career arc improving some other bucket. It's all just about reasonable expectations and making the best decision you can, and honestly drafting the players you like the best, but at the most reasonable spots where you're more likely gambling the least to gain the most, essentially. Like, that's the way I think of it. But I'm very tired. I'm starting to think I'm talking way too theoretical here. Joe McCarthy. Thanks for the questions, by the way, guys. Joe McCarthy. My strategy is to skip the Quentin Johnsons and go straight to the Pukas and Tank Dells. Foolproof. Just draft the good players.
I'm going to write that. I'm going to write that down.
I think it's worthy of it. Same, Joe. So Franklin is much more of a deep threat. Yes, he's much.
I think he's mostly a deep threat, but Peter and I differ on that one.
Yeah, did we? Yeah, I said high, low slot. I think CD Lamb's in his bucket, and he's reasonably as over the line as CD Lamb, but he's not quite that ceiling on his overall play. I just like the fact that he came up.
Yeah, I don't see CD Lamb and Franklin anywhere near. Like, I don't think they play similarly. I don't think they grade out similarly. I don't think that I would let Troy Franklin carry CeeDee Lamb's water.
No, I would agree with that. It's in the works. Cool. And let's talk about Jamari Thrash. I'd love to, but Zach hasn't talked about it.
I haven't watched him yet. I will do my homework for next week. And at some point this week, I will watch Jamari Thrash.
I'll give you some notes. Again, this was my first pass, and I haven't looked over it a little bit. He's another high low slot player, sub 11%. 30% above average in terms of receiving yards per team pass attempt in that bucket since 2015, because that's when I have ADOT from. Comps come up between Antonio Golden Gandy, who I did like too much, and William Fuller. Again, I'm mostly choosing the names to not over-exaggerate how much I like, but show you reasonable. Like, Will Fuller with some serious dynasty value, and on the field, there were some good plays, but obviously he didn't hit fully. So I'm trying to limit the expectations here for someone like Thrash. But it also runs from Romeo Doubs and Gabe Davis based on where they were playing in college. Wide range of outcomes in this cohort with a lot of productive misses, which is important. You know, he looks productive, but there are a lot of productive misses in this bucket, is essentially what I'm trying to say. But he's interesting, relatively productive prospect, the type who wasn't overly dependent on contested targets. Again, that's something I'm trying to focus on. His career total is 16%, which is about right for that kind of ADOT. It's not over 20% where you get the guys who I imagine are what you often call vertical threats, just winning off.
Yeah, contested catch guys.
Those contested catches. It's about right for the role of Antonio Golden Gandy, and also Kelvin Harmon, another guy I liked. At the time, I just liked the production numbers relative to the team volume, but the role, I think, adds an extra layer of interest there. It groups them all together there. Two examples of this popular but often busy or busty category, and with over 20% contested catches. Harmon and Antonio Golden Gandy both depended more on contested catches, is essentially what I'm trying to say. So maybe that's a positive going in his favor. But here I'm trying to guess at the way he plays, which is why I was interested in Zach and what he would have to say about it. I think it's relatively productive even when you look at it, but there are a lot of productive hits in that role. But he's a little less dependent on contested catches, so I'm interested to see what he looks like. Again, he's not playing for Alabama here, so we're not. I actually don't know where he played. The ACC, best I got on this particular spreadsheet, and I don't want to open up the other one because the stream will crash. But the ACC isn't terrible, but it's also not, like literally Alabama is where all players are drafted from, as far as I can figure. So
I'm pretty
sure
he was at. I'm pretty sure he was at Louisville.
Okay, yeah, that's about right. It's not Ohio, wide receiver U or nothing, but it's also not terrible. He's not playing against just future car salesmen and stuff, or however Chris Harris used to say that. But yeah, that's what I got written down so far. Have you guys looked at Javion Baker, UCF? No, I haven't.
No, not yet. He looks like a downfield guy though. Just looking quick.
Peter, talk about the quarterbacks in this class. Yeah, I believe there are only two, and I'll draft them probably loosely in the order they were drafted in the NFL. I don't
know. There are at least three. There may be 5 first-round picks this year at quarterback.
I did see a clip of Caleb Williams on Twitter throwing like a downfield 9 route, but from the opposite hashtag or something, where he crossed the field, and they were like,
yeah.
I don't think that's normal.
He does some really, and I haven't fully fleshed out the quarterbacks yet, but like he does some things, and you're just like, human beings can't do that. And then you rewind it, and you're like, he's not a human being. He did it. I saw it.
That's the only answer.
But
then he also can't be B, and this guy, this is
And then like there were also like plays like this past year, their offense changed quite a bit, and it didn't do him any favors. But I also like watch him move like his feet in the pocket. He doesn't, drives me nuts. An awful lot of the time, he doesn't set a platform, like he's just moving his feet, and I feel like you get in a lot of trouble doing things that way. So, like, again, I don't want to talk through quarterbacks yet because I haven't fully watched them. I'm not ready to say that I have no idea about quarterbacks anyway. But this is what I think. Like, I'm not there yet. I don't have an opinion, but like, it's like you said. Like every now and then you see a throw and you're like, just I don't know how he did that.
I will say, if you're actually interested, second podcast before last, I actually did break down how I'm trying to get a little bit more interested in quarterback evaluation from rookies, and I did a whole 30 minutes on it, and I broke it down. So, Joe McCarthy, what's higher over the next 10 years? Number of top 10 rookie wide receiver seasons for rookies drafted outside the first round of rookie drafts, or the number of people that land on the moon in that time period? I don't know enough NASA stats. I think we basically stopped going to the moon at this point, haven't we?
It's no longer NASA. It's whatever Lord Musk wants.
Yeah, but it's the first one for me, obviously.
Yeah.
Aha. Peter,
maybe that was
didn't mean to literally put blood, sweat, and yeah. Sorry about that. Didn't mean to openly wound myself. Just joined. Who is Peter fighting? Zach.
Look, man, rookie evaluations get a little tense. I'll throw hands. I'll throw hands.
Got the 105, 107, 110. Should I try to trade up? Yes. Yes, you should. Actively. I would try and keep the 5 because Bowers.
Yeah. Pair the 110 and the 107. See how high up you can get. Have fun.
Yes, sir. I just used ADP, to be honest, last year, Quentin Johnson, which is about, it's about where, about where I would have. Yeah. Post-draft, I still had him third above Zay Flowers, which is a miss, above Josh Downs, above Tank Dell, above Rashee Rice, also some other members. I mean, you got to respect, he was productive. It's everything we were just talking about in terms of his role, and there's a risk there. But the NFL liked it enough to, one team did. If he'd hit, probably won pretty good. Taz Walker is so hyped up. Oh, okay. Way too high ADP currently. He's the type of guy who could, because again, especially if you like to per game, he's gonna a big guy with a high ADOT and a per game basis. He probably looks like Demaryius Thomas, as far as I know, which was literally insane.
But like, honestly, like where are you getting ADP right now for rookies? Because nobody's drafting rookies yet. They're not in the league, like unless you're talking Debbie leagues. So I've heard a couple people be in on Tez Walker. I've also heard a lot of people be out on Tez Walker, or be in on Odunze, or be in on Worthy, be in on. So like, I don't. It's all think
speculation before the draft and before the ranks really solidified very much. It's getting.
But I could see having Tez Walker anywhere from like 4 or 5 to like 9, and I'm not going to fight you over it.
Like that's pretty good. Oh, I'm glad you have heard of him at least, Genji. That feels like I'm on something. He's good. I know it. Okay. Malik Washington is another name. I've got so many 13 names to add, let alone to look through. But I will note it down for sure. I at least will remember that you said it.
I did watch Malik Washington, and I have him at 13. Played at Virginia, 5'9", 192. So they like the thing with him. So like he had a great year. He had 110 catches. He had 1,400 yards, 9 touchdowns. It is tremendous with the ball. Like he's like a running back with the ball. Contact balance. He breaks tackles. He actually does a good job seeking out separation in zones. So like finding the lanes for his quarterback to throw and then sitting down in them. He's got very good hands. Doesn't body catch often. But I don't think he's very sudden, which is really weird for a player that is very good at yards after catch. Because in order to create yards after catch, you have to create separation at the catch point. And he doesn't really do that. He gets bothered a lot by physicality. He doesn't create a lot of space as a slot receiver. And to combat that, what Virginia did was they ran him in motion and on screens, like bubble screens and things, a ton. And so to me, he's one of those players that looks really cool until you realize that they manufactured so many touches for him and he's not creating his own separation. And so like there's some interesting things to his game, and if you get him in a spot where a team is going to be creative with him, yeah, Malik Washington is fine, but it's hard for me to put my belief in an NFL team being creative after watching the NFL as long as I have.
Fair. Or for 5 minutes, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Brock Bowers' stats are actually pretty impressive. I was just looking at the tight end database because I haven't gone through it. But this was the guy I mentioned. He's the second tight end I want to look at.
Yeah, that's right. Well, that's what I said. Yeah. He's the other tight end.
So you're not discovering nothing there, Genji. I already know.
In any other class, JT Sanders would be like the bull of the woods tight end, and we would have been talking about him for 2 years. But it just so happens we've been talking about Brock Bowers for 3.
I'm just looking. Where is he? Come on there. Trying to look for a name to make it sound dramatic, but where are you, Pitts? Let's see. Pitts had 1.5 receiving yards per team pass attempt, which is incredibly high. Trey McBride, for example, is one of the highest in terms of role relative to team offense. So the stat I like for receivers, and that was 2. Brock Bowers was a 1.8, but he's getting 8.5 yards after catch per reception.
Yes.
That's career long.
He is going to be a problem. Like, he is quick. He is athletic. He has great hands. He can go up and get it, but he can separate. So, like, if you try to cover him with a linebacker, he's going to be way too fast and way too quick. If you try to cover him with a corner, he's going to be big enough that he's going to bully that guy. And he may be too quick anyway because he's just that. Like, he may run in the he may run a 4.5, which is dumb.
Pitts is 1.5 receiving yards per team pass attempt career total, which with tight ends includes a bunch of noise, but 2.4 yards per route run, which is pretty impressive for a tight end, boy. Bowers is 1.8, which is higher receiving yards per team pass attempt, so he's a bigger part of the offense relative to the size of that offense. 2.6 yards per route run. For those who like yards per route run numbers, that would be higher as well.
Yeah. Well, but that's what I've been. I mean, I know you kind of laughed at me a few weeks ago, and I said, like, people are going to talk about Brock Bowers like they were talking about Kyle Pitts because he is everything that Kyle Pitts was, but can block, which is actually what you want. Like, I know people like, oh, you don't want them to block because then they're not run. You don't need them to actually block. You need them to be able to block. It's kind of like running play action. You don't actually have to run the ball. You have to make the defense respect you running the ball.
I kind of want to filter this, but we don't have the time. But I want to know who has anything like 8.5 yards after catch per reception. Phenomenally dynamic after the catch.
Jarvis Landry.
With that level of receiving. Yeah, it's going to be a wide receiver.
And he didn't even do that in college.
Xavier Worthy is someone I would easily say, I'm happily taking him towards the latter tier of the first round. I don't think I'm going to have to so far based on what I know of the values, but like Zach was just saying, like, picking draft picks at this point is just...
Worthy could end up being a second-round pick in this class, which is why.
That's where I want him.
He could end up being a second-round pick. Brian Thomas could end up being a second-round pick. And those two players, I don't think Rome Odunze will be. I think Rome Odunze comes up, but I really like Brian Thomas, and I was not expecting to. Like, usually you see one player on a team that stands out, and you're like, all right, that's it. We've run the well dry, but it's not that way with Brian Thomas at all. Like, I think he is fantastic as well.
Yeah.
In the same wide receiving core as Malik Neighbors. It was funny. My start for my write up. Yeah. My start for my write up for Brian Thomas is, in the words of the immortal Ricky Bobby, if you ain't first, you're last. But he's not. Like, that's the thing. Like, he's actually really good. Like, it's a man.
I
Yeah,
had Thomas source,
yeah, me too. We got the same top
specifically
6.
reference that, like, Neighbors is like 3.7 receiving yards per team pass step. No air left for anyone else, that basically means, except Brian Thomas, who got 2.8, which is above average for most successful players, especially career averages, who actually hit above the average as well. And like that, 2.8 is really good. And 3.7 is phenomenal. Over 3 is great. So 2.8 isn't like eye-popping, but it's definitely good. And then with another player on the team at 3.7, that's but the problem, there isn't a problem, but I really had to dig into Thomas because it's basically in his last year. He's kind of buried before that, which leaves me with some questions. But the last year, what the frick is that?
So that's why I said, I said we have difficulty reconciling high-end talent when it's standing next to exceptional talent. And Brian Thomas Jr. spent his career at LSU playing second fiddle and sometimes third, fourth, and even fifth fiddle early on to Malik Neighbors. Yeah, like so he, like, you didn't see it, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, now there you see it.
Wasn't Butte on the team as well?
Yes.
So yeah, he drops down because everyone's favorite squeeze Butte is around because his effectiveness on some plays means they want to play him. And I hate that because the late breakout thing is usually the talent wins volume. The fact he had to wait is bad, and it is. But career adjusted, situation adjusted, and the age adjusted, and that last season meets all 3 above the average. Like, that's a good year. Like a really good year relative to all that other stuff. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not pushing him into the first tier, but it's a really interesting profile. It's a really interesting profile kind of a year, actually. Gavin Ferguson, Zach, is the tape that bad on Braylon Allen? Because the measurables and age are fire.
I mean, no, he is a running back. Like, he's 6'2", 238. Like, this is and again, almost 1,300 yards, 1,240 something yards, another 984 yards this year. He actually had 28 catches this year, but I wouldn't necessarily call him a pass catcher. But he's good enough out of the backfield to be able to, like, do screens and safety valves and that sort of thing. I think he's got really great patience, Gavin. He does a good job letting his line set up blocks. He doesn't seek out contact, which is something that I have kind of started to look at and worry about when running backs actually actively go try to deliver punishment. Like, if they're going to get hit, he'll hit you back, but he's not going out of his way to hit you. And that was something with, like, John Kelly that I liked. I fell into that trap where, like, he could go to the right and gain 3 yards, or he can go to the left and put his shoulder through your face, and he's going to the left every time, which he gives up 3 yards by doing that. And when you get to the NFL, the guys that you're trying to put your shoulder through their face are much bigger, and so your shoulder breaks. Yeah, your shoulder breaks on their face. So, like, I'm not looking for a player that initiates contact, but I think Braylon Allen doesn't initiate but will deliver. So I like that. I think he's good enough that you can use him as a pass catcher on screens and safety valves. I don't think that he's going to run away from people, but he can run a long way. So, like, he's not breaking off a 70-yard touchdown, but if he gets a hole and gets up to speed, he can run, he can break off a 30, 40-yarder and be okay. Drawbacks, I think sometimes his patience turns into hesitancy. And when you're that big and it takes you that long to get moving, he's not real bursty. Once you start hesitating behind the line of scrimmage, you can get into a lot of trouble. He is susceptible to being tackled low, which I know that sounds like something you're like, oh, well, yeah, everybody is if you get their feet, but that's not necessarily true. Like, there are players who are really good in traffic. J. Mike likes to say picking through the trash. And Braylon Allen is not one of those players. I think he also fails to beat an initial defender far too often for the way I like my running backs. And part of that is he's just not quick laterally. And I don't think he's fast enough to get to the outside. I think what you have with Braylon Allen is, and this is not going to sound sexy, but it's actually not a bad thing to have. It's like good Jordan Howard with the ability to catch enough passes to be, a 30 catch guy.
Top 12 seasons in Jordan Howard.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. Like he's good. But he just isn't like, it's not like, man, this is a sexy running back. It's like, oh, this is a good running back.
Yeah, I had to go look at my model to remember the names. I really haven't dug through running back too much yet. But he's not my number one in this class. But I'm sticking with what I started with the running backs so far from what I've seen. Like the running backs last year I wanted in the second round. I really liked in the second because they were in the second round. That's kind of where this class starts. But it's relative to this guy. So there are going to be running backs worth a first, but there's no running back in this class with good first round draft capital, ideal landing spot. I'm not taking them top 5.
Right.
Already. I mean, outside of like everyone else falling to the 6th, I'm in a super flex, to be clear. Like there's not one that can crack that top 5 with ideal draft capital and ideal landing spot. But there are going to be a few that I think, at least 1 or 2, that could well be picked 6 to 12 for sure relative to this class. But the level of interest I have on them, which is like Zach was saying, top 12 seasons, good fantasy stuff, kind of starts from the second round list. if this was last year's class, which is not. Zach, do you have a favorite QB outside of Williams, May, Daniels? Ignore them. No, there are 2 you definitely don't ignore, at least, and there are a few others that are interesting.
I haven't watched quarterback enough to give you a real definitive answer on that, Gavin. Like if you put my feet to the fire right now and made me pick one, it would be Michael Penix. But sorry, Dr. Penix. He was in school for 6 years. That makes him a doctor, right?
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Why else would you stay that long?
But yeah, like that's. But I haven't watched enough JJ McCarthy. I haven't even watched enough of the 3 guys that you listed. So it will be a while before I get to quarterback, Gavin, because we have at least 4 weeks of the Hootenanny before we're to that show. And so that's going to be the last 2 weeks in February and the first 2 weeks in March. So it'll be mid to the end of March before I need to talk about quarterbacks. So I'll get there before that, but it won't be much before that. And I probably won't watch more than those 3, Penix and McCarthy, maybe Bo Nix. Like I may watch 6 guys, but I'm not watching Spencer Rattler. I'm just not. I'm not. Like you can't make me.
Make me. Not physically make me. Leakovitz Commander, sup, boys? Not much. Don't know why I said that. Tell me the truth about Coleman and Mitchell. Are they overrated?
Not on my list. They're not overrated. I have them graded out much lower than a lot of places I've seen. I have Keon Coleman at 14 in the class and Mitchell at 15. So I'm not big fans of their, like Keon Coleman feels like an absolute trap. Like super athletic, great highlight plays. He's athletic enough to be a return man at 6'4", 210, which is impressive. Like it is, you can't get around that. He's excellent in contested catches. He goes up. He is probably the best contested catch player outside of maybe Odunze. He's actually probably better than Odunze. He will high point. He's very smart when a play breaks down. So if you're hearing this is the opposite of Tez Walker. So like when the play breaks down, Keon Coleman works back to his quarterback, gives him an outlet, gives him a way to get out of trouble. And Coleman will play through contact. So a lot of these receivers are small, and if they get bodied, they get bumped off route. Coleman is just going to shrug that off. but I think he's very, very slow and choppy getting off the line of scrimmage. So you're not getting quick separation. He has trouble separating at all versus man coverage outside of vertical separation. I think he often misreads cushion and uses ineffective double moves. So like a corner will give him like 8 feet of cushion, and Keon Coleman will throw a double move at him and then just be right back where he started with like 6 feet of cushion now instead of getting by a defender. And I do think he drifts against zone coverage and gets content with just kind of sitting down beside a defender and trying to rely on his physicality, kind of posting up. And so that is not the type of player that I like to go after for me in Dynasty. And then Adonai Mitchell he's a little quicker. He's good, like hip sync and transition on hitch and comeback. So like straight line, he's really good at doing that sort of thing. He plays with good pace, transitions very quickly from the catch to a ball carrier, which you like to see, adds yards after the catch. He does a good job hands catching, extending his arms. But although he's a hands catcher, he does a lot of double catching. So like he'll get out, the ball hit him, and then he'll have to go kind of re-secure the ball. That's not great. You know, your window of making a play, especially at the NFL level, is not a long period of time. And if you're spending time double catching, not only are you giving the defender a chance to get there and get on you, but you don't have great control of the ball. And so you're susceptible to fumbles, susceptible to pass breakups. I think he's also a little bit Jekyll and Hyde in his route with his efforts, which is not great. And even though he's a big body receiver, he's 6'4", 190, I think he loses to physicality an awful lot. So those two are down my list because of the way they kind of profile, because of the to use your term, Peter, the bucket, like the type of the archetype of receiver that I see them as is not a type that I gravitate toward.
Yeah, I don't like Coleman at all.
Doesn't make him bad.
But it's interesting. Yeah. No, not at all. It's interesting because my notes literally start where you did, but it starts not even Chase Claypool had to rely on 26% of his catches being contested. Like that's where I begin. Like that's a high watermark as well of everything I thought about. I don't like him all. I have him ranked 12th out of 14 wide receivers that I've looked at. And the only reason he's 12 and not lower is because I've only ranked 14. I put him lower when I can. But also because I expect some interest, both from the NFL and fantasy community. So I'm wrong a lot. So I'll bump him up with people seeing something, but
yeah.
Nope. Again, Ferguson, exactly. In my opinion, if you give Burrow a pass on his performance with his health issues, you should give Lawrence one. Yeah, that seems fair. Yeah. Ingram was 5th in targets, and no one cares. That's true.
No, he's awesome. Like that's fine.
But yeah, we actually like him, and have consistently. Spencer Rattler has life. That's true. He always has that going for him. And we approve of him being alive.
You can't make me, Genji. You can't.
Javonte buy low contract year. Yeah, I think somewhat. Talking about Javonte Williams, Denver. Yeah, I think it's. I think most running backs are interesting, except for the ones with value. Right?
Especially with a subpar class coming out. Yeah.
He was a really big role. He's just one of those players that kept riding up. Like, this is going to pay off at some point. And then it did for a little bit, and then it went back down. Like, he's got that 3-down role, and it's not quite paying off. I was actually going to mention Russell Wilson earlier. He's someone who, as opposed to Lawrence, while his season was as disappointing, if not worse than Lawrence, his play actually measures, at least by the end of the season, as better than Lawrence's. Like, he wasn't necessarily playing badly, whereas Lawrence was. I found that interesting on some level. But yeah, they both had terrible seasons. QB4, I'm sure. I love what you said about Zach Robinson's positive effect on Atlanta offense, Zach. Nice.
I really was disappointed that the Patriots didn't end up with him. I think he's going to be fun.
I bet Drake London and Kyle Pitts still remain useless. Bajon explodes, so I hope they all do well. But I don't want Bajon out of the three if I get the choice. Gavin Ferguson, are you agreed? Mayer is the McBride of... No, he's not that level.
He was not.
If he hits, he's that good. But I think he's really solid. And yeah, if you're going to throw a second at a tight end, I think he's one of the interesting ones.
The McBride of 2024 was Laporta.
Yeah.
Again, I don't mean to tight end has been a position that I have been very successful evaluating because it's pretty easy. You look for
tight end's easy.
Yeah, you look for guys who can do everything they're asked to blocking. You look for guys who can do everything they're asked to as a receiver, and then you look at their numbers and athleticism, and you're like, yes, this guy. Yeah, like Mayer's not quite that athletic. I don't think that he does as much as the top tier tight ends, and McBride is closer to the top tier tight ends than he is to the proletariat, like the middle tier. Mayer, like pie in the sky upside for Mayer is like he's Jason Witten, and he's like tight end 10 for like.
I think that's literally the name I put on it. It's like I really hope he can be Jason Witten someday.
Yeah, and like he can make the catches he should make. He can get open on plays that he should get open on, but he's not doing the extra things that Kelsey, Kittle, McBride, Andrews, even Pitts. Well, like I can't denigrate Pitts and Ingram. Like they do the things offensively as pass catching weapons that Mayer can't do, but Mayer can make the plays he should make. And that should make him valuable, he said, with his voice going up. Like it's kind of a question because
let's get this
how valuable really is tight end 10.
Like that's where we're at. Like and you know, yes. Word. Stafford is elite. On an NFL level, you can make a serious argument.
Sure. Yeah, well, and he is elite at elevating his receivers for sure.
Yes, I think that's fair. Hypothetical: Marv goes to New England. Neighbors goes to Arizona. Is the talent close enough where you'd comfortably draft Neighbors over Harrison with this situation? At the same tier for me, but I would. If given the choice between the two, I'll take Harrison. I'd go just for landing spot this much.
And it's probably the same for me. And
I'm thinking about making an exception for Baltimore, but outside of that landing spot.
Well, New England's pretty Baltimore-esque in terms of being a dirt. Well, and so here's the thing too that you got to think of. If they draft Marvin Harrison Jr., if the Patriots draft Marvin Harrison Jr., that means they took him at 3, which means they didn't draft a quarterback, which means you either have to go out and sign something. I mean, they have a lot of cap space. I think they're like 3rd or 4th most cap space. But you either have to go out and sign a quarterback, or you're playing with Matt Jones and Bailey Zappi, who really can't exploit what Marvin Harrison does.
Don't put this evil on us, guys. I don't want to see that.
So, I mean, yes, you can make a strong case for Neighbors. I still have Harrison in the tier by himself, and so I'm gonna stand on that hill and bite the bullet. But like again, if in 4 years you come in and tell me Harrison failed, and I'm gonna be less surprised by that than if you come and tell me that Neighbors failed. And in this situation, especially, like this is the situation for for Harrison to fail. Hey, why don't you go catch some Mac Jones passes? Those would be nice and crisp.
Thank you, Harry. 12 team Superflex start 10. Give Devontae plus the 105. Get McLaurin the 102.
No, I don't think so.
So
I don't think I'm giving up
for Brock Bowers, basically.
I don't think I'm giving up Devonta plus to get a quarterback. I mean, Gavin, I guess we'd have to see the rest of your roster, but like it would be really difficult for me to give up. I think Devontae Smith is undervalued, underrated.
That's what I was going to say. I think this is actually a fair trade to get a quarterback in a Superflex league, but that's because Devontae Smith isn't valued enough. So no, I'd probably try and find another way doing it.
Yeah,
I mean, I'd rather add 25 first.
He right now is a screaming buy to me because he's like the very bottom of all the wide receivers that you want, and so to me that's the buy. Like I'm like, man, I'd take him over like 5 of the guys that are going ahead of him. So
I feel like AJ Brown might eat him out just because he's a little older and people are a little less further removed from the isn't AJ Brown good, and so I think he's interesting.
Yeah,
but I agree he's in that. Like if you're going to list a group of wide receivers, as Devontae, it's AJ Brown. I would add that. I'm really interested in this option. Yeah, that didn't change it. We get it. Yeah. So Romadose is verified good. He's definitely verified good in college and probably likely positive NFL expectations given draft capital.
Yeah.
Will Fuller was a stud. I really hoped for more. We never quite got it. Lance Zerline wide receiver grades are out there. He graded Neighbors above Harrison. That's interesting.
He also grades NFL versus, which is fine. Like,
I put him in the same tier. But I will take Harrison over Neighbors if forced. Rob Dance, his grades on top 6 wide receivers match my rank order. Neighbors, Harrison, Rome, Thomas, Franklin, Mitchell. I haven't looked at Mitchell, so it's interesting. Alex, how would you adjust your draft strategy if the rookie draft is prior to the NFL draft? I don't know how I would adjust it. I would say that you're gaining a bigger edge for having your own process and doing your own work, to be fair.
Yes.
Like if everyone else is casual and you're not, you want it as early as possible. Like do it next week. You're gonna miss a lot more and get a lot less accurate. And by the time the season's over, you're like, and if I'd waited a few more weeks, I would have also grabbed this guy and this guy, but you are going to be better than everyone else. Personally, for that reason, I like it after the draft. I don't think I have quite that edge over anyone in any of my leagues. So, and I think it's just sensible to gain all the information you can before making these fairly sketchy in general bets. But yeah.
So, and for me, like I have one league where we do draft before the NFL draft, and at first, I came into it with a strategy of trading my picks because you don't have all the information and you don't have the most important information, which is like draft capital and landing spot, mostly draft capital. And so I started out doing that, and then I completely pivoted because Peter, I had the epiphany of what you just said is I have a process and I'm like have been fairly successful even pre-draft with my process. So why not use that to my advantage over the people that I'm playing against that don't have that process? So then I started trading for like more late firsts and early seconds because the way I grade isn't necessarily the way things shake now. So you just said that had the what Rob said about Lance Zierlein, and Lance Zierlein is very smart, very trusted, great draft analyst. he's not grading for fantasy football the way I am. And he and I are going to have differences. And no offense to Lance, but like it's my fantasy team. And so I'm going to go based on what I think. And I've had success doing that. And again, I'm not saying that I'm better than Lance Zierlein because I'm not. Obviously, he's on whatever NBC or wherever he's at, NFL Network, and like I am here on the grind and happy about it. But also, like I said happy about it. I'm collecting that same big paycheck that was a couple of weeks ago from DLF.
We were the low mark in that comparison. I'm just,
but like that, like I agree, Peter and Alex. If you're plugged in, or if you have people that you follow that you trust that have a process, like do that. Like make bets on either your process or somebody that you've identified that has a good process that you trust. And make those bets because you will be further ahead of people that are drafting based on NFL mock drafts and things like that.
Yeah, the closer you are to, I have people in my second round that everyone else in my league doesn't even know their name, the more I'll be trading for picks in general. As a rough guide, I think I would, like I always do when I adjust, it's mostly based on forward and backwards, based on that kind of scale. Whether I hyper focus the things in my process that I really value, or zoom out to focus less on the things I want to focus on versus what most people focus on. And what I'm trying to say is, last year, for example, I would have hyper traded into trying to get Addison, JSN, and Gibbs, and I would have thrown everything at the wall, just going up into that tier. And this year, I'll throw everything into getting into the top 5. In the Superflex, I feel very comfortable with that top 5. And so on the end of the extreme where everyone in the league is Zach, that's all I'm interested in. I just want top 5 and everything else is negotiable. And the further away from that I am, the more likely I am to give me a third. I'll take a third round pick. I'll trade for thirds. I'll trade for fourths because I think I might just catch Xavier Worthy here, or I might just catch Thrash in the third or fourth round before the NFL draft. And so there's a scale of adjustment there based on the league that I'm playing in. Maybe that'd probably be roughly how I approach it. Get Braylon goes 4th round. Bet Braylon goes 4th round. In the NFL draft, could. He's not my number 1 running back so far, although I've only rushed against running back, so not scaring me. Sounded like you again. No. Yeah, Mayo's cracking tight end 1 range on keep trade cuts. So there goes that buy low. Not really. I mean, maybe depends on your league, but like a top 12 tight end and a keep trade cut or a dynasty ranking is here are the 12 that have some value. It's a very steep arc, and it comes to value at tight end. I think
it is the Venn diagram of keep trade cut and sleeper is like a circle, isn't it? Because like I've met like again, and I don't wear this as a badge of honor or anything, but like I can't like I physically like sleeper has too much. Like I don't want to be able to make bets. I don't want to be like I don't want badges. I don't want.
I keep clicking on those things at the bottom, and I'm like, I don't want. It's going to take me forever, and it takes so long to load everything.
And I've never been on keep trade cut either. And maybe I'm missing out, but I can't. It looks like dominoes. Like I've had people show me screenshots. But
data there, but like I don't value things the way I value them, and I maintain the Superflex values at least from the times I've looked at the most crazy I've ever seen of any source of here's how valuable quarterback.
Gavin, yes, Tucker Kraft, but that like we were talking about Tucker Kraft last year.
Yep,
that was
a good one.
That was the tight end that you could get in the in the 4th or 5th round of your rookie drafts that nobody was talking about, and it was the Hayden Hurst, Mark Andrews. They drafted a tight end, and then they drafted their real tight end later, and that to me is Tucker Kraft.
looking at my values chart, my rank sheet, top 3 tight end values, me versus DLF. Let's take it to the extreme. And that tends to be where I look. So I tend to think my league mates are capable. So I think league mates DLF is probably the best parallel to where I'm at towards where they are. George Kittle, number 1, Trey McBride, number 2, and then Tucker Kraft. I'll take it.
Those, you're doing all right there, Pete.
That counts as me in on Taek Craft, I think. And that's just because I have him ranked, I think. No, I have him 22nd positionally, and they have him 29th, but I have him in like the top 180 picks, and they are outside the top 120. And that means I'm pretty high relatively on him. Like, he says no value, and I'm like, I'll give something. Nah. Greg DeLuch, he's actually good. He's someone who's actually already traded for higher than I would give for Kraft, because DeLuch has got a name at this point. Kraft is still kind of in the weeds. Not everyone thinks of the name. Like Zach has taught us to think of him as being a named target. But that's about it. Pat's getting Russ. Oh, I could see that. Oh, without Belichick, Russ seems like the guy kind of quarterback Belichick would have wanted, though. You know what I mean? Well, you said the new coach is kind of that.
Well,
Belichick,
I mean, he is. I mean, obviously a disciple of Belichick. He played for him and then coached under him. I'm still so frustrated with the organization and the way, like,
just don't want to think about it yet.
I'm very frustrated.
Do you want to go into 2024 with Mac Jones? Would that be fine?
No, well, I mean, at this point, you might as well. At this point, like, honestly, the best solution would be to trade back. The second best solution would be to take the tackle that's available at 3, like, and try to build that way. And like, you'll still be absolutely terrible because you got Mac Jones, which is fine because then you'll have a good pick again, but you'll have an offensive lineman under control for another 4 years. So, you know, then you start doing that. But like, the way they handled the succession plan from Brady was so bad. It was so bad.
Was it really a plan? that's where I'm at. That didn't look like there was much thought put into it.
So I think Belichick had a plan and Kraft didn't like it, and that was where the schism happened between that. Because I fully believe that they wanted to trade Brady instead of Garoppolo when they did that. And to me, the only other option once that happened was when Lamar Jackson came out. Like that was my succession plan. I'm like, look, the brilliant move, the out of the box move is you've got, I think they had like the 24th or 25th, was whatever they took Sony Michel with. You have that pick. Lamar Jackson's still there. You make that pick on Lamar Jackson. All of a sudden, that gives you the ability to trade Tom Brady, right? Get a just haul of picks because Tom Brady is still the best quarterback in the NFL, the best quarterback in NFL history, and at the top of his game still there. So it would suck because you give up that 6th ring, but you get picks to put an offensive line around Lamar Jackson. And then you completely revamp the offense, which I think is part of the problem that the Patriots have had, is they've still been trying to run that offense that they ran with Tom Brady, but they had 17 years of iterations of that offense, and they only peeled back like 3 years of iterations, and then they were like, hey, Mac Jones, learn this. And you can't, like, Brady started at year 1. And so if you don't peel that back for Mac Jones, you're already putting him in a position where he's probably not going to succeed. But
Gavin, this isn't what I meant. I was saying if I were to choose 3, and let's say 5 wide receivers that I think are really good values to go out and trade for, like, here's the 5 I'm going to be sending offers on. AJ Brown would be on that list. Devontae Smith would definitely be on this list. I also think Deebo Samuel and T. Higgins. And who's the other guy I just saw? I was like, oh, yeah, that's an interesting one. See, I've got Addison on here, but come on, let's just obviously T. Higgins.
I mean, it's
just like Keenan Allen a little bit, but that's not who stood out.
It's wild right now that per ADP, Devontae Smith is going at wide receiver 19. Like, that's wild to me.
Diggs probably next on that list. Yeah. That's what I was saying, not in terms of here are my ranks, but here's the top 5 where me between the ranks that I see, ADP, and then I was specifically looking at DLF right there. That's where I'm higher, significantly higher on guys that I really like, if you know what I mean. So, and that I think have top tier range of outcomes. Yeah. Given the unknown in Minnesota, would you trade 3 mid-first for Jefferson? Yes.
And 1 QB, yeah.
Yep. If you can trade for Jefferson, probably just do that. Yeah. Getting focused on these kids and their sleeper apps with all, who Jamal Wise and Gabba.
Their Dan Fogelberg music. Yeah, I know.
God damn. I've been waiting all my whole life to be an old so I can shake my fist at things and say the youth. I'm excited.
It's so funny. It's so funny the amount of times when I am on Twitter and I make the exact same face as the GIF of Clint Eastwood where he's like got the cup of coffee. He's like I'm like, man, that's me.
Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi had 0 wide receiver weapons last year. Yeah, they had some.
But I mean, Rob, I am a Patriots fan. They are bad.
I'm a little more towards Rob here. I don't think they're bad grading on the arc of the NFL, but like neither's Jared Goff. Are you excited? I mean, but Matt, I think like, they're below Jared Goff, but they're in the middle.
But my point isn't even necessarily that Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi are bad, but they cannot utilize a receiver like Marvin Harrison. There's a reason why Jacoby Myers was so successful with Mac Jones and Mac Jones successful with Jacoby Myers, because Jacoby Myers is very good at creating separation. That's not what Marvin Harrison does. Marvin Harrison does vertical separation. Mostly. I mean, he's not completely that, but like a big part of his game is being a bully and going, And that's
Myers.
Yeah. And Myers. And that's not what Mac Jones does.
But at least they had Zeke to lead. Exactly. And
we told you.
You reminded me the other day.
We told you to trade a third for. Or I did. You and Russ were very against that.
Is it Kansas? Yeah, it was Kansas. The year that literally no receiving option caught
Kansas City. They did. Yeah, it was.
Remember that Alex Smith? Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, that was insane.
And like everyone is like.
Some kind of wide receiver catches.
Everyone was like Dwayne Bowe. Dwayne Bowe is going to be the guy this year, and he had like 900 yards and no touchdowns. Yep,
it's not a good season. 900, though it may sound promising.
Yeah, that's not going to get it done.
That's another good pinpoint on it doesn't matter if there's no one good. Your player isn't going to be great because there's a lack of other. Like they're not going to get 25% target share and 2,000 yards. It's just targets and yards are in fact not vacated.
Talent is targets and target is talent. Like that's they're
Finkel is Einhorn. Einhorn is Finkel. That's literally talent and targets.
Yeah, intricately linked. It's a double helix. Pete, did we make it to the end?
I think we did.
Woo! Appreciate you chatting, but
everyone.
we're gonna look over there.